I'm super happy that Monika Suckfuell and also her group that will present on Thursday is able to be here. And Monika also has a psychology background originally from Berlin, but then already in the promotion, in the PhD, did like effects of narrative structures of films, or going in this media direction very early, and then actually drifted into University of Art and Media and Communication Science posts and lectureships, and is now at the University of Arts in Berlin in Communication and Media Studies. No, it's like the Lehrstuhl for Communication and Media or something like that. And she, I got to know her on the last SCSMI, not the last, but previous actually, in London, and was very impressed by her work because she uses a lot of actually quantitative measures to look at film, but she tries to keep, she's the researcher I think that best tries to keep really the ecological setting for it, including having a cinema lab and trying to not manipulate movies and stuff, and which poses a lot of difficult circumstances on her, because then it's hard to interpret data and you have to use other methods to do that. So I'm very excited to hear.
Yes, welcome to my talk. First of all, I want to thank Katrin very much for the invitation and for the appreciation of my research. And Katrin asked me to concentrate on a construct that I developed over the past 10 years or so, the so-called modes of reception, or modes of cognitive and emotional processing of movies. So my lecture is divided into 3 parts. I begin with the methodological part, in which I will describe how these modes of reception can be measured. I move on to a part in which I will elaborate on the theoretical considerations, and then I will exemplify the idea of a switching between modes of reception by referring to reception data for this animated short film we have already talked about in the morning. Okay, first I would like to give you an initial idea of what modes of reception are. In dealing with media offers, a cinema audience, but also a television audience, internet users, music listeners and readers resort to individual strategies, which I call modes of reception. In the course of learning and socialization processes, these strategies are learned, modified and adapted through repeated application. And as I understand it, the term strategy implies a well thought out act aimed at a specific goal. However, media receptions are more or less automated cognitive and emotional processes, and I prefer the term modes instead of strategies of reception because I think it signals a less targeted process. No one will have access to only one mode. The hypothesis is that there is a number of modes of reception differing from person to person. On the other hand, a dominance of modes which are frequently used by a particular recipient is postulated. The strategy to develop a measurement device can be described as an interplay of theory and data. Initially, I have examined the existing theories. Involvement research yielded a fruitful basis, but the vast number of studies, as well as the fact that the construct was inconsistently defined and measured, has prevented attempts to systematize the different approaches. The plethora of theoretical and methodological conceptualizations of involvement points to its great significance as a construct, and on a less positive note, it can be said that involvement has become a global category which includes any form of participation. Altogether, it seemed plausible to develop such a construct not only on the basis of a current yet fragmented state of research, but to complement the model with explorative insights. In the next step, qualitative interviews were conducted with 34 individuals. An item pool was developed on this basis, which consisted of 136 statements. These statements were rated on a 5-point scale from I totally agree to I totally disagree by 343 persons. And on this databasis, an initial model was developed and a selection of the best items was taken. And finally, nearly 800 persons were confronted with the selected items in an online survey, and the result of this strategy was a model that statistically fits the given data. This is the model. It describes a 4-dimensional construct with the factors or modes of reception, identity work, in-emotion, imagination, and production that are all interrelated. And I will now go through this model step by step. A comparison of one's own life with movie content called ego involvement, and a comparison of the self with characters in a movie called socio-involvement constitute a hierarchical factor that stands for the contemplation of the self and personal vital issues. I call this factor identity work. This form of reflection, induced by comparisons with fictional characters and fictional events, offers an additional use compared to identity work in daily life. The safe and enclosed reception situation may facilitate careless or even playful thoughts by the viewer about difference and similarities with the characters and their circumstances. These are the items for the factor social involvement. For example, I am most interested in characters that are similar to me. Later on I will give you all the items. You will see. These are the items for ego involvement. For example, the scenes of a film that I can relate to my own life are especially interesting to me. The factors diegetic involvement and emotional involvement constitute the hierarchical factor in emotion. This is a neologism I came up with because reviewers forced me to do so. Diegetic involvement is a kind of involvement that does not imply near complete repression of the real world. This dimension of involvement just depicts the readiness to be entirely drawn into the movie. Diegetic involvement is possible precisely because the viewers always remain in control of the situation. An essential condition for this control is the awareness of the fictitious nature of the movie. And this unceasing control over the situation also enables the viewers to indulge their feelings. And this mode of reception is called emotional involvement. Emotions that viewers bring into the reception situation can be addressed, updated, and acted out. These are the items for the factor diegetic involvement. For example, I'm completely caught up in the story. And these are the items for the factor emotional involvement. For example, I cry during sad scenes in a film. In emotion and identity work are positively correlated. The contemplation of the self is favored when the viewers are truly engaged in the movie and vice versa. But there is one negative correlation between the modes of reception in emotion and production. This correlation is interesting as well as plausible, because production is a more distant mode of reception which is characterized by thoughts about production issues. These are the items. For example, I often imagine how the film was made. By switching over to that distant mode, the viewers can regain control over the situation at any time. Regaining control can fulfill an additional fallback function. If the viewers cannot participate, neither with regards to the content nor to the acting characters, the viewers can still have a positive movie experience by reflecting on the making of the movie. These ideas indicate that an either-or conceptualization of involvement and distancing falls short. In the depicted model, the mode production is a form of involvement. The viewers think about the filming process and thus involve themselves in the reception. And by switching into the mode production, the viewers are able to protect themselves from uncomfortable sensations, for example, when a movie gets too heavy or too pathetic or something like this. A further dimension is termed imagination. In this mode, the viewers imagine alternative plot lines. These are the items. For example, I often imagine how a film could have proceeded differently. The factor identity work is positively correlated to the factor imagination. Why? As the cinematic world often tends to have little in common with real life, the recipient is required to generate mental variations of what is depicted on screen. The recipients use the contents and characters as projections in order to imagine alternative acts. And the mode imagination is significantly related to the factor production. The correlation is high, but not high enough to introduce a third hierarchical factor. However, a justification for this high correlation is that the viewers must actively invest cognitive effort in both modes. Even so, the underlying operations of both modes of reception are quite different. The viewers imagine their own plot lines in the imagination mode, while in the production mode, the viewers distance themselves from the events on screen and picture what goes on behind the screen. Okay, perhaps you are asking yourself why other forms of involvement are not part of the model. For example, aesthetic involvement and things like this. But modes which are applied by only a small number of persons in very specific situations and only for certain movies are not statistically significant, so to say. They do not form solid factors in such models. The four depicted modes are stable and are applicable to different movies. The scale has a name, Modes of Reception Inventory. The measurement instrument consists of 18 items, 3 items for each mode of reception. The scale is reliable and valid. The scale is applicable independent of gender, age, and education, and is systematically related to other constructs, and the scale is easy to implement. Subjects are instructed to recall several movies they had seen and that are as diverse as possible. The answers were to apply not just to one, but all the different movies. And we ask the participants of our studies to fill out the scale before they watch a movie. And this is important because it differentiates the scale from other scales which intend to measure the overall experience after the reception of a movie, like for example narrative engagement. Assistant. Okay, it's important to understand that the modes of reception do not serve as a typology. No one is only an identity worker when watching films. For example, the metaphor of an equalizer may help, according to the model, we can say that person 1 may have high values on identity work and in emotion, but very low values on production, yet middle-sized values for imagination. Person 2, on the contrary, for example, has high values for production and all other modes of reception may be low. So each one has its own configuration on the equalizer. We can measure your modes of reception if you want to. You just have to scan the QR code or go to the link and then fill out the questionnaire, and if you like to, after the discussion round, we may have a look at the results. But I would suggest that I continue with my talk because it's late and we are tired, I think. But the possibility is given. No, we can very fast have the results and have a look at it. But I move on. With the theoretical considerations behind this construct mode of reception. No one will stay with just one mode from beginning to end during reception. The reception process can be described as a more or less variable shifting between several, in this example 3, dominantly used modes. During reception, many situations arise in which an initially chosen mode of reception no longer works. For example, a movie can unexpectedly be so violent that the boundaries of a certain participant are transgressed. Viewers then do not have to leave the cinema. They can instead focus their attention on other aspects of the movie. In my view, media reception exhibits a certain tolerance for time intervals with modes of reception that fail to correspond appropriately to the media content at hand. And there is confidence that learned modes of reception will suit sooner or later throughout the reception process. Recipients are thus not lazy, but rather flexible and competent in handling their various internal possibilities to switch. It is not impossible that different modes can, from time to time, superimpose each other. For example, the bars with a B. Viewers may also experience time intervals of reception during which none of their available modes are successful. For example, the bar with the A. A specific function can be ascribed to the switching of modes in the course of a reception process. One would assume that the purpose of a change of modes during a reception is to reach a state of equilibrium or balance. However, adjusting the activation on a medium level throughout reception would be monotonous and boring. Therefore, the opposed hypothesis that humans have a need for alternation seems plausible. This is particularly true when taking into account the specific circumstances. In a safe reception situation, spectators are able to test their emotional and cognitive boundaries, at least for a certain length of time, without any consequences. During reception, time intervals of both very high and very low arousal are possible. Yet recipients probably do not maintain such extreme states over a long time. Thus, the aim is not to reach balance, but rather to adhere to an individual budget of energy and simultaneously to the greatest possible variability. A kind of controlled loss of control. I think everyone agrees that motives determine the decision for a particular movie. Like, I'm watching this movie because I just want to escape from reality for a while. but modes of reception also influence the decision within a circular process. The starting point is the consideration that recipients preferably select movies that correspond to their modes of reception. The use of individual modes of reception appropriate to the movie leads to a sense of competence, which is a positive experience for the recipient. And in the broadest sense, they will want to repeat this positive experience if possible. And altogether, that should result in a cycle during which the modes of reception become more and more manifest. The following postulation is important because it has consequences for the research design. The reception process certainly depends on the characteristics of the movie the recipient is confronted with. In the course of a mutual and dynamic relationship between movie and recipient unfolding over time, the hypothesis is that a switching between modes of reception takes place in the following manner. For example, this recipient, confronted with the first scenes of a movie, switches from mode 1, perhaps identity work, to mode 3, perhaps production. The potential impact of a specific movie feature cannot be determined a priori. Its potential unfolds only if the movie feature, this one, the movie feature coincides with the modes of reception that are available to this particular recipient. That means for another recipient, this movie feature may not have any impact. Thus, the hypothesis is, and this is central, features of a movie only have impact on a particular recipient when they correspond to her or his dominant modes of reception. Okay, I now move on to the illustration of switches between modes of reception. The starting point of the argumentation here is that, as I have said, a switching between modes of reception enables recipients to regain control over the situation. A need for control is deeply human, and psychologists have dealt with this variable in various theoretical contexts, especially in theories of emotion regulation. We can differentiate a number of distinct emotion regulation strategies. They apply already before the reception starts, or they may be applicable during reception. The first strategy, situation selection, stands for an avoiding of situations likely to generate negative emotions. For example, many people consequently avoid horror movies. Situation modification means that the decision was to watch the horror movie, but the viewers try to change the situation to their advantage. For example, they only watch horror movies in bright light or together with other people. During reception, a strategy called distraction may be appropriate. Distraction means to simply shift the attention to non-emotional aspects of the situation. Distraction requires minimal cognitive effort. A viewer using this strategy during a frightening horror movie may have a look at the furnishing of the cinema or at the people sitting in front. Another strategy which applies during movie reception is called cognitive change. When watching a movie, a person can decrease negative emotional impact by appraising, for instance, a very violent scene in a horror movie as an interesting idea of the directors. Cognitive change is also a very effective regulation strategy because it requires little cognitive effort. And cognitive change, as Cross and Thompson define it, is totally compatible with my idea of a switch from one mode of reception to another. Emotions can also be regulated after they have already been elicited. Suppression is such an emotion regulation strategy. Emotional expressions are elicited, but are at once inhibited, and suppression requires cognitive effort and increases physiological activation. In an empirical study, we were able to identify indicators for all these strategies in reception processes, but we also found indicators for further strategy. We often observed that the participants in our study touched themselves, their nose or their mouth, like some people are doing here. We call this regulation strategy self-adaptation. I will come back to this strategy later on. In the following, I will now demonstrate switches between modes of reception by referring to data we have gathered in our lab, the so-called Cinebox, which is equipped like a little cinema. And here is a photo of the lab so that you could imagine the situation. In the Cinebox, we combine different data collection methods. Before the movie, the participants fill out a questionnaire that comprises, besides other questions, the items for the modes of reception. During reception, we measure heart rate and skin conductance. Additionally, during reception, we observe and record facial expressions and body movement with two cameras, infrared cameras, because our lab is darkened like a cinema. After reception, we conduct interviews by confronting the participants with their own reactions. We show them, for example, their facial expressions and their physiological data linked to the eliciting scenes of the movie. To do so, we use software that enables us to integrate all observational data. It is possible to simultaneously having a look at the recorded facial movements and the movie and the physiological data. And our study participants are usually very interested in reflecting on their own reactions. Yes, in one of our studies, we gathered data from 154 individuals watching the animated short film Father and Daughter. You already know it. I think it is not necessary to watch the movie now, but perhaps you have already seen it on YouTube or you would like to do so. Okay, in the following illustration of reception processes, I will focus on the facial expressions. The recordings of the facial expressions of the participants were analyzed using FACS, or the Facial Action Coding System, a coding system developed by the psychologist Paul Ekman. A FACS coder deconstructs an observed facial expression into so-called action units. There are 58 action units in FACS, and the coding is done without knowing which scene of the movie caused the reaction. It took us a very long time to code the 154 reception processes. But now I will go through the reception process of only one participant of the study. And it is a 28-year-old woman. I asked for permission to show these pictures, and she kindly agreed. On the left side, you see the scene in the movie that has caused the reaction. On the right side, the facial expression. And on the bottom of the screenshot, the skin conductance process is visible. I left out heart rate to keep it clear. And the short film starts approximately here, if you want to look at the skin conductance. Okay, at the beginning of the movie, Father and Daughter, the father embraces his little daughter, you know this, for the last time, and then he rows away in a boat. The central conflict of the movie is established within this scene. Our participants' facial reactions to this scene were a lowering of the eyebrows and a tightening of the eyelids. And according to emotion psychologists, an emotion is not due to the eliciting event itself, but to the evaluation or the appraisal of the event by an individual. And a lowering of the eyebrows and a tightening of the eyelids signals that our female viewer has appraised the scene as new and unexpected. Shortly afterwards, the daughter leaves the place of farewell alone on her bicycle. The facial expression accompanying this scene was a raising of the chin, which can be interpreted as an indicator of regret and sorrow. The woman shortly afterwards shows strong signs of emotion regulation, and besides other action units, she presses her lips together and sucks them. The pressing together and sucking of the lip is an indicator for the emotion regulation strategy suppression. During the short film, the daughter returns to the place of farewell 8 times. And when she rides away from the shore on her bicycle for the 2nd time, our participant showed a significant skin conductance reaction and also a facial expression. She raises her inner and outer eyebrows and the upper eyelid, commonly interpreted as indicating surprise. In the interview, she stated that at that point in the movie, she still expected the father to come back. Thus, she is astonished to see the daughter riding away with her bicycle alone again. In a later scene in the movie, the daughter returns to the place of farewell with her husband and 2 children. Our female participant showed a so-called dimpler, a tightening of the mouth corners, looked like that. A dimpler signals an event being appraised as violating internal norms. And immediately afterwards, she showed indicators for suppression. She presses the lips together several times, accompanied by a swallowing. In the interview, she stated that at this point in the movie, she realized that the father would never return. Another scene causing strong reactions shows the daughter riding her bicycle uphill and into the wind, making clear the effort it takes her to deal with the loss of her father. This part of the short film causes a number of strong skin conductance reactions, and the sequence of facial expressions starts with the lowering of the eyebrows. When the female viewer touched herself. She rubbed her nose with her right little finger. We also can see movements of the mouth and the lips. And in the interview, she stated that she was thinking about how the drawings were realized. The self-adapter seems to accompany or initiate a cognitive change or a switching into another mode of reception in which production issues are in focus. In the next scene, the daughter is blown forwards by the wind. Again, our female participant shows movements of the lips, pressing together, sucking, licking. She also gasped, lifted her shoulders, swallowed. And I have prepared a video for this. Let's have a look. These reactions seem to be an expression of the relief she was co-experiencing after the effort driving the bicycle uphill. In the interview, she described the scene as very well done and mentioned the different directions of the movements shown, the riding into the hill and up into the wind and uphill to the left side of the screen, and then the being blown forwards to the right side of the screen. Finally, now as an old woman, the daughter goes down the hill to the shore from where her father's boat left and into the water. She seems to commit suicide, but at that moment the movie switches to a dream world. The water suddenly changes into grass. In the interview, the female participant stated that she was irritated at seeing the sea having been made to disappear. Let's see. Again, a video. Okay. She showed a lowering of the eyebrows, a tightening of the eyelids. In the next step, a raising of the outer eyebrows, combined with the movement of the head upwards and backwards. These facial expressions signal that it was an absolute unexpected event for her. When the daughter meets the father once more in a dreamlike sequence at the end of the movie, our female participant smiled, and at the same time she showed one of her most intense skin conductance reactions, and she stated in the interview that she really liked the happy end of the movie. There is another scene that caused our participant to smile. In the movie, the daughter, as a young woman, comes back to the place of farewell together with friends on their bicycles. Our participant smiled as a reaction to that scene. But why? This also seems to be a short moment of cognitive change in which she was thinking about the beautiful drawings. Or maybe she was thinking about herself being together with her own friends. Unfortunately, the interview does not reveal information about what exactly made her smile. But the fact that she explicitly said that she did not make any reference to her own life supports the interpretation that she was thinking about the beautiful drawings. To sum it up, our female participant seems to have stayed in the, these are her reception modes. Our female participant seems to have stayed in the emotional mode during nearly the whole film, and in fact, she scores high on the mode of reception in emotion. At least two scenes in the film caused a cognitive change by switching to the mode production during a scene showing the daughter driving upwind, and also by switching to production during the scene in which the daughter comes back to the place of farewell with her friends. Okay, the description of the process for another recipient is a completely other one. But there are interesting things on the aggregate level. Very shortly to this. To demonstrate the procedure of data analysis on the aggregate level, that means for all participants of the study, I would like to show you only one of the results. And for those of you who are interested in this kind of data analysis, there is a recent publication in which I have described the analysis for the data of father and daughter in detail. I use a special software for this. This software is called Theme and was developed by Magnus Magnusson, a mathematician from Iceland. The aim to analyze the dynamic relations between aspects of the movie and the reactions of the spectators. This is the aim of using Theme. And the analysis of time patterns perfectly meets the requirements of an analysis of the manifold and complex dynamic relations between events in the movie and reactions of the viewers. Using theme enables me to analyze both immediate and delayed reactions. And even the analysis of anticipatory reactions is possible. And for this I've brought an example. For example, in father and daughter, each changeover from one segment to another is reinforced by remarkable changes of the music. And these turning points provide a very clear segmentation of the movie and thus help the audience to structure the plot. And we find occurrences of a pattern in which a combination of action unit 4, this is the brow lowerer, and action unit 7, this is the lid tightener, occurs shortly before the music and the plot changes significantly. And this combination of action units is commonly interpreted as an appraisal of an unexpected event. Let's see how this looks like. As I've said, this is before the plot changes, and not at the same time and not afterwards, it's before. And there is a significant time pattern in the sound. Okay, I'm ready, but I have brought a few other examples. If you like to, I can. I see a few saying, okay. So, I have another interesting result, and it's this. The analysis of the reception processes of the 154 participants in the study is not yet fully completed, but due to the incredible complexity and the sheer amount of data. However, I have conducted analysis of the available data, and I want to highlight at least one further result. It is eye-catching that many of our participants show so-called mixed emotions during reception. Mixed emotions means that different, actually contradictory emotions appear at the same time in the faces of the participants. Of course, in daily life, we also observe such mixed emotions. However, I think there are good reasons to postulate an increased appearance of mixed emotions during movie reception. One reason is that in movie reception, the viewers are confronted with a huge variety of events at a forced rate. Another reason is that scenes in the movie are often designed to generate contradictory emotions or irritations on purpose. Events shown in movies are often ambiguous, and so are the elicited emotions. I can show you an impressive example of another female participant of our study. The sequence starts with a scene in which the daughter's final resignation is announced by showing her bicycle falling over a couple of times. Just look at her face. Okay. What we can see here is a smile. But we can also see a so-called upper lip raiser. This action unit signals an event being appraised as violating external norms. And so this is an example for a combination of the emotion happiness with a negative appraisal. And what we can see here is a fascinating mix of surprise, the raising of the eyebrows and the upper eyelid, and sadness, a down pulling of the corners of the lips, which is unilateral in this case. It is important to differentiate between reappraisal reappraisals, suppression, masking, and blends. To reappraise means that an event in a movie has caused, for instance, happiness, but in the next step, the viewer appraises this emotion as inappropriate. To suppress an emotion means to inhibit an emotion as an attempt to regain control over the situation. We have seen the frequent pressings of the lips as an indicator for suppression in the example of the first female participant. To mask an emotion means that for a very short moment we see, for instance, anger in a face, but the viewer does not want his or her emotions to be observed and immediately tries to mask the anger with a smile, for instance. Blends are contradictory emotions that appear at the same time. So, reappraisal, suppression, and masking involve a time delay. The emotion is elicited, but reappraised, suppressed, or masked in the next step, whereas blends are shown simultaneously. And currently, I'm working very intensely on mixes of joy and sadness, which according to recent research cause a very interesting emotion called being moved. But this is another lecture. Thanks for your attention.